Okay. Welcome back to another episode of the Find Food Freedom podcast. Kitty, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, this is a very important conversation that I'm really excited to have. And like I said to you right before we clicked record, I'm excited to take some of this hopelessness that I'm feeling and put it into action. And I know that you're going to be able to help me do that here in December,
Absolutely.
which we'll talk about in a little bit. Um, but I want to share with our audience really quick before I hand over the mic to you of just kind of how you and I ended up meeting and how we ended up here together. So long story short, I found myself crying on the couch while I was breastfeeding my 1 month old daughter right after the Uvalde school shooting. And I just remember thinking like how is this happening?
Hmm.
Like not only obviously Uvalde is not the only school shooting we've had, clearly, but I just remember being like, how is this our reality? How is this real?
Hmm.
And fast forward, I'm not proud of how long it's taken me to get to this point of action and to figure out like, okay, what am I going to do, or how am I going to help, or how am I going to
Yeah.
make change? But I came across Cam Rogers, who her podcast is Conversations with Cam. But I saw
Hmm.
Cam's post when she was at the Hill with you and your group March 4th. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I need more information. Like this looks like such a great organization to help make a change and make a difference. So long story short, you and I got an email. Now we're here today.
Yes.
So if you would please just kind of intro what is March 4th? What is your organization and what are you a part of and what are you doing? That would be so
Yes.
helpful to set the scene.
You bet. Well, thank you again, Sam. So March 4th is a 2-year-old organization, and I started it completely by accident, which is oftentimes what happens in advocacy. We are a nonpartisan organization, and that just means we do not side with one party over another. It's irrelevant. Um, we are singularly focused on ending mass shootings by reinstating the assault weapons ban. So that is, you know, that's kind of our headline. But to give you a little bit of context, I have no background in politics or in government or in advocacy. I've spent 15 years in sales, actually at the same company, and I thought I was going to die there. I loved it, and then life happens, and Uvalde happened. That was one of my turning moments or turning points as well, having 3 young kids. My oldest at the time was going to be going into kindergarten that fall. So I realized, as you know, we were all consuming this tragedy through all these different means, that I too was going to be, susceptible to this because I had to educate my child in America. I had to send her to a mass shooting target in elementary school. And that just really rocked me. I think everyone kind of lives within their own bubbles. And I always say that when Sandy Hook happened, I was 25 years old, and I just selfishly and naively figured, you know what, the adults in the room are going to figure it out. And by the time I get to a place where, I have kids, like I'm sure, well, this will be sorted out.
Yep.
Um, and that is obviously a really selfish take, but that's what I thought. And then this happened, when it was in my sphere, and I realized like, okay, this is all of our problem, right? And shame on me for being on the sidelines for so long. But um, as I really got activated, my husband and I went overseas on a trip literally day after Uvalde happened. So it's all I could talk about. We went to the French Open, which, is a melting pot of people from all different countries to come watch these matches. And I heard the same thing from each different native country, person over and over and over and over. And it was, we've heard, we're so sorry, how horrible. And also, like, we do not understand what you guys do over there. We have no idea why this is the problem that it is in America. Like, we don't have access to guns. We don't have access to assault weapons. Like, we don't get it. And so to have people say that to your face, I think we all know, yes, it's an American problem. Nobody else lives like
Mhm.
this. But to have this happen and then have people just look you in the eye and be like, this is a choice, you're like, it is. So that planted a seed. And then about a month later, on the 4th of July, which is, as we know, the most patriotic day in our year as Americans, a mass shooting took place at a parade on the 4th of July, about 10 minutes away from where I live. And we were at a neighboring parade. We were not at that parade. But suddenly, very quickly, all of us are sheltering in place from a man at large with an AR-15 who has just murdered people and injured dozens and dozens more because he stood on top of a roof with a semi automatic weapon and fired indiscriminately and used a very effective weapon. So it was the worst day ever. And that's coming from someone that didn't lose someone in the tragedy. So you can only imagine beyond that. But I remember that 4th of July, my 5-year-old daughter at the time looking at me, being like, why can't we play outside? It's the 4th of July in her red, white, and blue. And all of our, doors are locked and windows are closed. And we just don't know where this guy is. And I'm like crying. I'm like, and I didn't tell her this, but in my head, I'm like, it's because I'm raising you here. That's why.
Mhm.
That's why you can't go outside. And so I started to ask questions on the internet, as one does in times of chaos.
Yep.
And, it was just kind of like, look, I've kept an arm's length from understanding this because I figured I just didn't understand and I wasn't educated in this. But help me understand, why does someone need an AR-15? And the answers that came back were, well, no one needs one. Like, is there a job that I'm missing that like you require? Like, what do I not get? No, I
Yep.
don't, nothing. And then I started asking, why can't the president just create an executive order and ban these weapons? And I quickly learned, oh, because we're not a dictatorship and Congress makes the laws, not the president. I'm like, okay, great. Must have fallen asleep in civics class. Um, as I started to put these pieces together, my like despair turned into just like rage. Like, F this. I am not doing this. I am not raising my kids here. We are not accepting this anymore. I'm not the first person to think like this, and I certainly won't be the last. But in a moment of just like desperation, I was like, all right, I want to go to DC. I want to scream at the top of my lungs that I want a federal ban on assault weapons. I don't understand why that's a hot take. Does anyone want to come? I understand it's gonna be hard. I understand it's been done before. I can't do nothing. So here's my email address. Like, put it on Instagram. Let me know if you want to come. And then I took Xanax and went to bed. And then in the morning, I woke up and there were 300 emails in my inbox from people all across the country. Just like, I'm in. I'll do whatever it takes. I work on the Hill. I can help you. I work in politics. I can help you. I'm in event planning. I know which permits to get. I can help you with like, this organization was formed by accident on the 6th of July. Um, and it was incredibly powerful. I think I'll stop talking at you, but for the quick fast forward of how that what came to be, um, within a week we had 600 people on the Hill, and we had a march. We rallied. We brought families and victims from the Uvalde massacre, as well as the Highland Park massacre. And we met with 30 legislators, and they promised us a vote on the assault weapons ban, which at the time I was like, great, that's what we're asking for. Like, do your job. And then 2 weeks later, not only did they vote on it for the first time in 30 years, but they passed it through the House for the first time in 30 years. So we came out hot, like we can make an impact, and we're still here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And it's so incredible to hear your story. And I relate so much to what you're saying is, again, what a privileged thing to say. But I was always like,
Yeah.
like people will take care of this, right? Like people, it'll be done. Whenever my children go to school, when I send them to daycare, whatever it is, like it'll be done. And like it hasn't until
Mm-hmm.
again, like organizations like yours are stepping forward. So you had said you used the words like reinstating the bill. So can you talk about, or excuse me, the
Yes.
ban, right? So like, can you talk about when was this ban originally placed? What was it? Why did it go away? Kind of just the
Yeah.
history of this.
I'm so glad you brought it up. I think it's the most important part of why we're doing this. Because if you look at the gun violence problem in this country, guns are the number one killer of kids in America. Guns. And this is a huge mountain to climb. There are so many things that need to be done, whether it's background checks or waiting periods or red flag laws. Like there are so many things. What we are focused on is taking the low hanging fruit of all the things, which is a law that we already had. And the only benefit to it expiring after 10 years is that we have data to show it worked, that you were 70% less likely to die in a mass shooting when this ban was in place.
Wow.
So it was voted on in a bipartisan manner, as well as with the support of President Ronald Reagan. It was voted on and passed in 1994. And it was part of a larger, kind of crime bill. And in order to get it passed, this is not uncommon, as I've learned, in legislation, but there was a sunset clause in the way it was written. And what that means is they said, okay, every 10 years, Congress has to vote to reinstate this, to keep this going. And so 10 years later in 2004, they didn't vote on it. So it's not like they voted it down, they just let it expire.
So what's the benefit of having a sunset clause? Is there, or like, why was that
It,
there? And
it
then,
oftentimes is a way to get things passed. It's like, hey, we're going to
okay,
do this. And then, in 10 years, if it doesn't work, we can keep.
got it. And then, but then, like you said, they just didn't vote. So how does that?
I think it's helpful to understand the context of timing too,
Okay,
right? This is 2004. This is post 9/11, right? We
got it.
did not have a mass shooting epidemic in this country
Very
prior
true.
to this. So, if we're being generous, like maybe they were thinking, what's the worst that could happen? Um, what we know now is that this law expired. And if you look at any chart and graph, it is a clear hockey stick in terms of mass shootings that have occurred, and that the common denominator is a legally purchased assault weapon. It makes them more deadly because they are effective weapons. And so suddenly, right, you allow civilians to access weapons that were made for military, and we can't be surprised that people are dying. And so I think, again, the reason we're focused on this is we can, as Americans, respect the Constitution, respect the Second Amendment, which says we have the right to bear arms, and we can regulate and we can say
Yes.
nobody needs an AR-15. Civilians don't need military weapons, just as they don't have tanks in their driveways. And so we find this to be a very common sense law. We find it to have precedent, meaning like it has passed before with bipartisan support. And then the best part is we know that 2/3 of America supports it. So it's just getting Congress to act.
Yes. So helpful. Thank you. And just to clarify for anyone listening, if anybody, like you said, it's the low-hanging fruit in the sense of like, if anyone owns an assault weapon at this time and this bill were to pass, it's not taking away those that are already out there even. It's
Correct.
just making them not accessible moving forward.
Yeah, it bans the sale
Accessible.
and manufacture moving forward. So it grandfathers in anyway. There, it is absolutely not a gun grab. And I think that's a common misnomer, right? Is, oh, come and get it. I'm like, no, nobody wants to come and get anyone's guns. What we're saying is, if we know based on data and experience that mass shooters tend to purchase this weapon because they can legally, to inflict harm, if we could prevent that, then we should. And it really
Yes.
can be as simple as that.
Yes. Absolutely. Oh gosh, yes. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. It's so helpful. So for people that are listening right now and they're like, wow, I didn't know March 4th existed, or I didn't know groups like this existed. What are some helpful things, like some takeaways that people can start to do today to get involved or to
Yeah.
start to see change?
So, one of the things that we've tried to do from the very beginning is just be very accessible. I think I've learned just through, my own experience that again, I kind of kept an arm's length from advocacy because I figured much smarter people were working on it, and they are. But emails that I would get and to organizations that I support where they would start talking about a bunch of different bills, or the ADHD in me would see 4 paragraphs and be like, I'll just donate. Um, I want to make it so easy that like if I can do this, anyone can do this. And so we try to think of our comms and our social media and our marketing like just tell me what to do. The busy woman in America who's driving to work and they know that one thing they can do is make a quick call to their representative. And we're going to make it so easy that you can click a link and it just starts dialing and then you can save that in your phone. Like we just want to make things so easy and accessible because they should be, right? This is everybody's civic duty to participate. We always say participation is required. What that participation is up to you. So the things that you could do at a bare minimum is follow us on Instagram. Sounds silly. That is where we, share kind of any updates, any easy to dos. That's where we have all our click to calls, figure out who just for, again, no being not being condescending here, but like everyone has two senators and one representative.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think there's like a lot of people out there that are like, oh, I didn't realize that's okay. Here's a link to find yours and then to
Yep.
find their number. And by the way, like we just had an election, there may be new people. So it's important to check that link, but making that phone call is really important. That phone call being voicing support for this type of legislation or this issue. And all you're doing is you're calling, and somebody that is 22 years old, that is an intern, is working on the Hill at these offices, and they say, hello, what is your zip code? What is your comment? Thank you for calling. Goodbye. That is it.
Yes.
Nobody's going to ask you follow-up questions. They're not going to ask you to
No
cite
one's going to
sources.
argue with you or
No. They're literally like as nervous as you. And they're like, oh, okay, I'll pass it along to the senator. And you're like, okay. And that's it. And it's 30 seconds. So making those phone calls really matters because you have a gun lobby, right? The people that are in power because of these gun manufacturers, that their interests are to protect gun ownership and protect gun sales. And so they are very organized and they are making calls every day. So at the very least, cancel them out, please.
yes.
But B, these calls matter because you keep this issue alive, right? Oftentimes you see a boiling point in America after a massacre happens,
Yep.
and that makes sense. And then people compartmentalize in order to survive. And the America, not those that have been impacted the tragedy, but other folks are able to move on.
Yes.
We call daily and we lobby, our organization lobbies all the time so that this issue never dies. You cannot let it fall to the
Mm.
bottom of the pile. So following us, making your phone calls, obviously donations as we're a nonprofit is helpful for us to do this work. But at a very minimum, it's just being willing to participate and engage in the conversation.
Yes. And I'm so glad that you had said that of like obviously like the world stops for these families, right, that are impacted and that lose loved ones. But I feel like for myself, like how I told you, it had taken almost 2 years for me to figure out. Part of it was I think my daughter going into a daycare, right, going
Yeah.
into a public school. But because I had the privilege and the safety in this bubble of like, well, it didn't affect me personally.
Yeah.
And it takes like looking yourself in the mirror to realize like, okay, well, this is still really affecting other people. And until you're confronted with that, right? Like sending my daughter to school and just being terrified. Um,
Yeah.
that's what really made me come forward. But it's so easy to live in a state, almost like you said, for emotional safety. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I almost ignored it because I'm like, I can't let myself open up and even like read these stories or look at this because it is so horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And again, what a privilege to be able to block that out. But and right now coming to it to say like I can't run from this anymore. It's actually causing me more anxiety to do nothing.
Yeah.
And it's not helping anyone. And it's definitely not helping our children in America.
I think
And
that's like a huge piece too. What you're saying is you have a lot of emotional response to living this way, right?
mm,
I would say every parent in America that is sending their kid to a school has some level of anxiety around school shootings.
yeah.
And that's not even all mass shootings, right? That is a subset, but every American child in a school is doing an active shooter drill, and therefore it is on everyone's periphery, right? Whether it's right in front of their face or they just know they have to talk to their 7-year-old about why they have to hide under their desk from an intruder. I think that's from a mental health perspective, a way to channel your anxiety is into action,
Yep.
to feel like you are doing something, right? That's at least what's helped me as I talk with with my own kids, I talk with my therapist, I'm like, oh, I want to keep my kids home and like figure out a way to homeschool. And like,
Oh, I
you
went through
can't.
that. I went through that
Yeah.
phase too. I think like all my TikTok FYP was like how to homeschool. And I was like, okay, so we're
You can't,
homeschooling. I'm just never
right.
letting my children leave my house.
And then what, right? No concerts, no grocery stores, no
Right?
places of
No,
worship, no malls.
nothing.
Like, hold on, right? So there's an element of we have agency here, and we live in a country that we have the benefit of using our voices. And so we better do it. Like,
Yes.
we have to do it. And if it's as small as, you know, posting something on social media to get conversation started, great. That's a great step. If you're ready to make that phone call, great. If you're ready to do it daily, even better. If you want to go to DC and lobby, fantastic. Like there are so many levels of getting involved, but you really can't stand on the sidelines anymore. And people aren't on the sidelines, they're
Yeah.
traumatized.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I find it so helpful going through any type of grieving or anxiety of like finding other like-minded people who
Yeah.
want to use their voice, whether it's other parents or just other humans that care
Mhm.
about kiddos or people, right? Again, we're not even just speaking about just school shootings, we're talking about mass shootings in general.
Yeah.
Um, so you brought up, if it's lobbying in DC. So it's a perfect segue of, partly when I reached out to you, I was like, what do I do? Like, I don't even know why I'm reaching out to you, but like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And you were like, okay, let's chat. So, of course, using this platform to educate and like asking you all the questions, because, you know, also putting this like imposter syndrome to the side because
Yeah.
I felt so silly like asking you questions like you said. I didn't pay attention in civics class either. I actually hated that class and like I'm more of a science gal with the nutrition background.
Yeah, right.
But so I had to really like tuck that away and be like, we're gonna learn, right? Like we're
Yep.
gonna learn and we're gonna grow and we're gonna do things. So I'm so excited for myself and Julie Roberti, who is our dietitian supervisor of our team of dietitians. We're going to be headed to the Hill with you
Yay.
and the March 4th group in December, which I am so excited. I actually tried on one of my outfits this morning. I'm like, I gotta have like a powerful pantsuit for
Oh
this,
yeah.
right? So I'm really excited. Like, what is that going to look like? What exactly are we going to be doing when we're at the Hill?
So I think the first piece is I didn't know. Like I like to think, right? Self-perception. I like to think I'm like a fairly well-adjusted, educated member of society. And in July of 2022, I did not know that you could just walk in and meet with your member of Congress.
I didn't know that until I chatted with you like a month ago. So
And
right there
like,
with you.
right. So that's the kind of thing where I'm like, well, I don't want to swear on this, but like if I didn't
You
know,
can swear as much as you want.
I'm working on it. But like if I didn't know, like I have to imagine a lot of other, so as we open that door, your member of Congress, in theory, was elected by you. And their job is to represent you. And they cannot do that unless they hear from you. And so, what better opportunity than to literally go to where they work and walk in and talk to them? Now, I think there's like the intimidation factor and like the imposter syndrome that you talked about. Because again, when I started this, and my now co-president Maureen, who worked on the Hill and worked in lobbying, she's like, I can help you set up meetings. I'm like, oh, I'm not a lobbyist. Like, I don't know how to do that. She's like, what? No, anyone can do it. Like, I can help you coordinate how to set them up. I'm like, oh my God, like, what do I say? Like, do I
What do
call
I
them
wear?
sir or ma'am? Yeah. Like, she's like, well, first of all, like, you're probably not going to meet with the senator or representative themselves. That's why they have staff, because otherwise, if they met with constituents all day, they would never work. And I'm like, okay, I'm like understanding this is a business, this is how this works. Like, so you kind of just have to break it down and realize, like, okay, you're going to talk to the person on that team who manages that particular portfolio of issues,
Okay.
and you're going to have a dialogue, and I think the bigger the meeting, the more time gets eaten up by like introductions. And so we do try to break things out and we've learned, right? And make it a little bit more intimate so that we can get to the meat of the dialogue. But it's like anything, like you do not need to be an expert in anything other than being yourself, being a
Mhm.
constituent of where you live and explaining your experience and why this matters to you. And
Mm.
that is it. So it's being authentic. It's telling whatever story, we say like practice, so that you feel confident when you're there. But ultimately, it's, hey, as you know, speaking from my own experience, I'm a mom. I have three children under 7. Every single day that I drop them off at school, I think through, like, did I say goodbye? Did I say I love you? Do I know what they were wearing? What if this is the day? If there's a ambulance that goes by my house during the day, my stomach sinks and I'm like, oh my God, is this it? And I don't believe that we should live like this. As a mom in America, I believe I should drop my kids at school and I should pick them up alive. And I believe that this piece of legislation is pretty common sense, and we need to see it in action. Um, as we talk about, I think it's really focusing on the commonality because, like I said, 2/3 of America does support this. Um, there are some offices. It's interesting. You go into Democratic offices and you'll find people that manage the portfolio of gun violence. And
Okay.
then in Republican offices, I've met with people who manage the portfolio of Second Amendment issues. And so there are party lines drawn by their own design, like they made them up, of how they should create what stance. But the tides are turning. The first piece of gun legislation passed in America passed in 2022 post Uvalde for the first time in 3 decades, and that was the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. It's called the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, meaning Republicans and Democrats alike created enhanced background checks and closed some loopholes and added more mental health resources for school officers, et cetera. So the tides are turning, but we have to keep pressure on to ensure that both parties know that their voters want this. And that is what you're doing on the Hill.
Awesome. That makes me so excited
Yeah.
because I keep trying to like picture what we're doing. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm excited to go and I'm
Yeah.
excited to learn. And it makes me feel more comfortable knowing, like you said, it's not about like knowing everything. It's just showing up authentically of like, I'm a mother in America and it shouldn't be this way, right?
Yeah.
It should not be this way.
And it's consistency, like bringing my sales background into it. This was what was drilled into my brain by my CEO for years is like, you don't call once. You call once and you think they're going to call you back. Like you call, you don't call them every day. You don't be annoying, but you call them every month and you
Yeah.
do not stop. And you tell them you'll be calling them in a month and you call them in a month. And then at some point, when they have a need, they're going to know that you've been there. You are consistent. It's the same
Mm.
thing. Like you have to go to these people and say, I'm here to talk about this. Oh, federal assault weapons ban, we're back. Oh, we want to reinstate it. We've got more support. Oh, now there's another tragedy that could have been prevented. I'm here again. I'm here again. I'm here again. And at a certain point, you bring people along. But if you go once, it's like, okay, that's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
And to know that you're with us, right? So we do have policy experts. We do have people that have been working in politics and in lobbying, and so it's this combination of that and the real authentic constituents just saying like, I'm begging you as a human, like do
Yes.
something.
Please do something.
Yeah.
So I know that my action item today, I'm going to be setting a calendar reminder for my phone calls because
Yes.
I too have ADHD and I could think about it every
Yep.
day, all day, and it'll kind of like live in my brain, but the actual act of doing it is
Yeah.
different. So that is something I will be definitely doing. And for those listening who want to learn more, I know you said following on Instagram is a great place to start. So
Yes.
where can people find you on Instagram or just any websites or resources that you think would be helpful to share?
Yes. So our organization is called March 4th, and that is March space FOUTRH, FOURTH with, and that is for 4th of July. That's the reference. Our
Okay.
website is we March 4th spelled out.org. And you search us on Instagram, you'll find us. And again, I think just know that the expectation is not that you are going to make phone calls every day of every, I get it. People, it'll come in starts and fits and you'll get activated and you'll fall out of habit. It's like
Hmm.
anything.
Yes.
But know that by participating at all, you're doing one more step than you did yesterday, and that you're aligned with an organization that is doing it every day. Our group
Yes.
of 200 plus volunteers is working on this every day. So if you need to take a break because this is a heavy freaking topic, we're not going to, and you can lean on us.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Kitty, for all of the resources. I'm really excited to meet you in person, and I'm just so
Yeah.
grateful for the work that you do and for giving us some hope and helping us take action. So,
Thank you so much. Thank you for using
thank
your
you.
platform, and I'm excited to get together.